Ladies and gentlemen, this interview is brought to you by Burn Up Coaching and the 21-day challenge. If you're an entrepreneur or a high achiever and you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed, burnt out, and you're just not feeling on purpose, and you want to reignite that passion and self-belief so you can succeed like never before, the 21-day challenge will help you get crystal clear on your life purpose, start designing that, your vision, your mission, your strategy, your objectives, your values, the things that are important to you, break that down into bite-sized steps, and give you a game plan over the next 21 days to really become your greatest possible self. You'll take action on a daily basis. You'll have weekly deep dive calls with me to make sure that you're breaking through your BS, and that is the 21-day challenge. If you are committed to breaking through and becoming your GPS, send me an email, chris@beyourgps.com, or find me on Facebook and send me the message 21-day challenge. Look forward to having you join your next 21-day challenge and achieve your biggest dreams and goals. Thanks so much. Let's talk about the iTunes review of the week. It is by Joanna Garzilli, and Joanna says, let's pull it up real quick. High energy and enthusiasm. Chris brings an upbeat vibe that is positively contagious. If you're feeling down or stuck, a few minutes of his show will get you in the necessary headspace to break through any troubles that weigh on you. Joanna, thanks so much for giving us that review. And if you're out there, you want to grow into your GPS and help us do that as well, go leave a review on iTunes, beyourgps.com/iTunes. We'll take you to the iTunes store, or you can search Becoming Your Greatest Possible Self on the iTunes store and give us a review like that. We appreciate you doing that in advance. Thanks so much. And thanks for the feedback. Thanks for helping us grow into our GPS. Now, this next man who's about to come on is an absolute wisdom source of gold, a gem, a absolute transformation for anyone who's going through challenges with addiction or has families or knows people who are also going through addiction or challenges like that. So Jeff is going to be providing so much gold, so much wisdom over the next hour. Make sure you have a pen and paper handy, ready to take notes, ready to dive deep, because he and I are going to go there. So make sure you're ready, okay? Jeff Jones coming on here in another minute. Jeff Jones is a licensed therapist, addiction counselor, interventionist, and family recovery coach. He has a mission to change the conversation about addiction in the addiction recovery space with professionals and family members alike. With the creation of a 3-phase family program and online community, he's both challenged and complemented best thinking about addiction and recovery. His vision is to collaborate with addiction professionals, therapists, and treatment facilities to empower the family members to engage in a process of recognizing the structural problem around the addiction, resourcing themselves so they can best create a family environment that's inhospitable to active addiction and sets them up to realize how they want to be a family together in the future. This was inspired to create a more collaborative approach to healing. And Jeff really works with the family as a whole. Why? The answer is simple and complex at the same time. The bottom line is that healthy family members allow healing to happen in the short term and continue to heal far and long into the future. And we are so blessed to have Jeff with us today. Jeff, you ready to rock this, brother?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're now live on Becoming Your Greatest Possible Self, brother. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your wisdom today with our audience so that we can overcome addiction, or at least provide support and resources to those who we know in our life who might be going through something like that. Thank you so much for what you do. It's so powerful, so profound, and I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Jeff. So let's dive right into the question of the day, which is the power of asking. So Jeff, how has this concept, the power of asking, played a role in your life? How has it made a difference for you?
Wow, the power of asking. I saw that, when I was looking at all the different
headline.
people
Yeah, you thought this
you
saw
were
the
having
theme
on here, and I'm going, wow, I could approach that from a number of different angles, really.
Yeah.
One, the professional angle, the situation family members are in is oftentimes they're asking their loved one who they're concerned about to change.
Yeah.
So, that's one avenue that we can get into. The other is the situation, like what I've kind of put together here. I appreciate you reading that bio. I'm like well outside of the box of normal kind of traditional thinking about addiction, and so on some level I'm kind of presenting myself and asking
Mhm.
for people to at least listen,
Wow.
to a new approach. So, one, Chris, I really, really appreciate you like inviting me on this show, even before I even knew the question of the day was the
Yeah.
power of asking.
Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome, man. And I love how you mentioned there about these families. They ask the loved one to change in their best interest, or even the loved ones are asking, people who are suffering from addiction ask the families for support. And that request, that ask can
Yeah,
literally make or break the success of this person's transformation. And so I really, I love how we started with that, and also how you are approaching it. The way you ask people is also, like you're innovating, you're doing something new, different, that is maybe not as conventional as the
yeah,
traditional ways and methods. So you have to ask in a powerful way that galvanizes people to action, that gets them to recognize the vision.
yeah,
So I'm super grateful that we touched on both of those, because they're both super important.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. So Jeff, let's dive into more about who you are. What do you stand for these days, and
Yeah.
what are these clients when they come to you, like how does that happen? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, a little bit about me is so I'm doing what I'm doing because of addiction in my own family.
Mm,
And so it goes back to my grandfather, my mother's father, and it was like this trickle down from his addiction to to my mom's trauma and her defensive coping trauma that she never really dealt with and kept secret. And the structure of the family that she raised me in was this structure that families go into to cope, survival strategies. So I was raised in that structure. I didn't know any better. There wasn't active addiction with my mother or my father. Well, my mom, like eating stuff, which at the time when I was a kid wasn't really considered addiction.
right.
But so she probably had some of that. But like I didn't have a lot of horrible stuff as actually what I had is my grandfather showered more love and attention upon me.
Mm,
But when I became a therapist, I like focused on families,
yeah.
on addiction and trauma. And I took a really good look at my own family and some of these patterns that I'm starting to talk about. And so that inspired me to, learn more. And what I saw in the industry was, kind of this myopic focus on the one person,
Mm,
um, to try to help them, to save them. And, the family, they don't really see their impact.
mm,
Or if they do, they don't really, it's not as important,
mm,
so there's a I'm actually writing a book right now. I'm in the editing phase, and there's one chapter on this, the parable of the river story. And so
mm,
the story is there's this village by the river,
mm,
and they are living a wonderful life. And all of a sudden, someone one day they look out in the river and they see a baby floating down the river, and a guy swims out there and rescues the baby and brings the baby back and is handing it to someone else. And then they're like pointing and going, hey, there's more.
mm,
So the village organizes people to swim out there and save babies. And then, like a day later, someone says, hey, maybe we should walk upstream and see where these babies are coming from, like who's throwing them in, kind of. And that's kind of the way I see on a large scale what's happening with addiction treatment is focus on that one. And yes, we need to save them. This is important,
mm,
but we also need to understand like what's the larger context. And a lot of times the families, what I'm really trying to promote is families to have like a both and thinking to where they are focusing on the context
mm.
and
The
the
individual.
individual,
Yeah.
and can kind of have this fluid back and forth to bring contributing factors in the context to bear to make best decisions for what's happening
So
right now.
So I love that. And to clarify and make it a little bit tighter, would you say that the context is how the family sees addiction as a whole? And does traditional therapy not really, it doesn't address how the family sees addiction and maybe the additional stigma or negative energy that they put on it? Like, what would you say is the distinction between you and traditional therapy?
Yeah, right. Well, I'm a therapist. I have
Right?
a private practice. I have a home office. Um, and the majority of clients I have are clients who are in some stage of addiction or recovery.
Right.
And those clients, their family, I can't work with them in
Right.
this online family community because for me, that would be dual relationship and I can't do that.
Right.
But in answer to your question, like, it isn't so much that families are doing anything wrong. Actually, the name of the book I'm writing is It's Not Your Fault.
Mm.
And so I want to be real clear. Families really aren't doing anything wrong, but it's like just the language that we use. And historically, like, so addiction, it's like there's a definition. The definition accepted by most national organizations include it's a brain disease, a chronic
Mm.
relapsing brain disease.
Mm.
And so that focuses on one person. The idea is, hey, just get your brain fixed. We the family over here are fine. You
Right.
need to get your brain fixed, and then everything will be fine, and we can go back to normal. And that's not the case.
Mm.
The family can't go back to normal. So I like to use language like, hey, this is an addiction disruption.
Mm.
And with a disruption, of course, we need to acknowledge there's an individual at the epicenter that has the largest impact, but there's also this context,
Mm.
these people around, they have impact too.
Right. And the disruption impacts the people, or are you saying that the people have the impact on disrupting the addiction? Like, what's the context of addiction disruption?
So the addiction disruption, I mean, generally, traditionally, the way we think about the impact of addiction is the individual has it,
Hmm.
then the impact goes to the family, then the impact goes to the community.
Right.
And that's like the same trajectory for healing is
Mm.
like, gosh, if we can just fix this one person,
Mm.
then, their healing will trickle over to the family and to the community. And yeah, that can happen, but it takes a long time and it doesn't always happen. So, like
Mm.
with this both and thinking,
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do is to flip that trajectory around and start with this online family community,
Mhm.
and there's a number of different pieces about that I can talk about. But
Yeah.
like, start with community. People come into the community, they learn some new skills, they try some things that are different, and they start to create a new structure in their family. And so the community is going to impact the family. The family starts to integrate new behaviors, and the individual will feel that.
Yeah.
So it can be both and, like,
Mm.
working both sides.
Yeah. So it's
And
not just the one person who's in addiction or dealing with the addiction that has to make all the changes. The family can support that, and you're creating a context where the family is just as effective and important in how they come together and how they study it and how they band together, how they set a vision for healing, for
yes,
recovery. That's just as important that they're bought in and their structure around that as the person who is dealing with the
yes.
addiction.
Yeah. And so our history, there was like, it wasn't, I think it was less than 50 years ago, families were blamed as
Mm.
like they were part of the problem or
No.
they were the problem.
Wow.
And so, that's like, there's a really good reason why families aren't reaching out because they don't want to be blamed,
Right.
and there's a ton of stigma and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I'm really trying to shift the conversation, shift the way people think about it.
Mhm.
shift like some of the language
Mhm.
to inspire, people to think about how we can do this differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. So, what was the impetus? And I kind of want to go back in the journey a little bit. The
Yeah,
impetus for you to be passionate. You told us a little bit about your own family's challenge with addiction, but your impetus to be passionate about healing in general and recovery from addiction in general, and then
right.
also the what set you out and set you into this direction of bringing the family in and making them an important part of it
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. So I, I have been a therapist since about 2006.
Awesome.
So, um, and I started to get clients who, like, for some reason, they just showed up
Mm.
who were family members. There's a woman like years ago who came in. I probably saw her like 4 times. She had 3 children, a husband who was a doctor. The doctor was, part of his job was talking to patients on the phone in the evening, and he would drink.
Mm.
And she knew this, and she just kind of saw this growing and growing and growing, and it was a problem. And she kind of said, "You need to stop this, or you need to move down into the basement."
Wow.
And, for him, it was a pretty easy decision. Okay, I'll move down into the basement. And
Mm.
so she tried all kinds of different strategies. And then she came to me, and she, like I had a very few resources. Well, I had like, well, have you ever been to an Al-Anon meeting? And
Mm.
let's talk about your stress and how you're dealing with your stress. And is it at a point where you need an intervention?
Mm.
So there were some basic resources that I had, but I realized I really didn't have a lot of resources. And actually, the fourth appointment or something, she shows up, and she's with her husband, and it was
Mm.
a total surprise to me. And I,
Wow.
like, real quickly, I understood that she expected me to talk him into going into treatment or
Mm.
reaching out for help or something like that. And so what I realized is the therapy kind of relationship was very narrow.
Mm.
And if at that time I there was something available like what I have now, it could have been like to start to for the whole family to start to see the larger picture. And it doesn't put all of the focus on one person, like you need to change. Like
Right.
that woman, she brought her husband in and expected me to, kind of like get into this polarized conversation,
Mm.
um, to change his mind. And the reality is when people are in addiction, their brain gets impaired. And like your loved one is not the person that you married,
Mhm.
not the person that you knew from years ago.
Wow.
And their thinking has, like, it's been distorted. So addiction, like using the next thing, the dopamine rush, whatever it is,
Right.
like that is more important than anything,
Mm.
than relationships. It's horrible. But
Yeah.
that's kind of what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm grateful you have such a strong stand for it, because that's why you're doing this work, Jeff. Like it's important that you really own that. It is terrible. It is terrible that these things, these substances, these alcohol or drugs or whatever it might be, or other addictions, are taking people's lives over and literally not allowing them to experience the joy of life, of relationships, of creation, of art, of having
Yeah.
a successful,
Yeah.
fulfilling life. These things are robbing people from that. So I
Yeah.
really, really thank you for stepping up to that challenge, because it's important. And I think we all at some level know people who are dealing with addiction or have dealt with addiction in our own lives. So I think it's really, really great that you're standing for that, man.
Yeah, I am working it,
Yeah.
Chris. And
Yeah.
so, a couple different ways that I could respond to what you're saying. One is addiction is so difficult
Mm.
to, assess, like
Mm.
whether it's me, trying to self-assess kind of thing. That's really hard because
Yeah.
then it would be my brain, like, the brain that is impaired by addiction trying to assess itself. It's kind of like the fox asking the fox to guard the hen house,
right?
kind of thing.
Good luck.
Yeah. And then with family members, like they're like watching this, they're having an impact by it. And a lot of times their impact is they go into different survival roles,
right?
Our strategies to deal with externally what's happening around them, internally the impact to them, and trying to stay connected as a family and trying to compensate for this thing we call addiction. And addiction, actually, what I like, there's one of my big mentors, Dr. Gabor Mate, uses a definition of addiction that's very different than, the chronic relapsing brain disease kind of thing. And his definition is along the lines of any behavior that initially brings pleasure or relief, but eventually problems occur and I can't stop it.
Wow.
And, there's some kind of craving, or there's some kind of like manipulating or trying to protect it kind of thing. So, from that standpoint, how many human beings do you know that don't have some kind of substance or process that brings them relief or pleasure? Yeah. We live in a culture where it's like, oh my God, there's all kinds of opportunity for that.
And there's all kinds of stress. There's all kinds of things that cause us overwhelm and anxiety, and we don't have healthy ways to process these things. So it's like what are we trained to do? We're trained for instant gratification. We're trained to like whatever it takes to get this release, to get this tension away, I'm going to do it, and then people do it like once or twice, and then they start getting into the habit, and then they soon become unable to have the discipline or the willpower to say, no, not right now. I have more important or valuable things to do, or I have a better holistic way to deal with this overwhelm or stress or anxiety.
Right. That's it exactly. So for family members, family members are a lot of times the survival stance they're in or the role they're in is their hope is that role is going to work.
Yeah.
And that their loved one is going to listen to them and change their behavior. And when they do that, then their nervous system will calm down. Then they will feel better. So they're not thinking this, but this is kind of the biological kind of background piece is in this strategy is this kind of underlying thinking that if I can just get this other person to like calm down or to be more regulated or like not drink, then I'm going to feel better.
Yeah, well, it's like to see something, if I can make the difference, if I can change them, if I can change their perspective, then everything will be better. And so I think that there's a lot of pressure on the family members to say, it's up to me to change this person so that we all can have, harmony. And deep down, they're like, I want peace, I want happiness. And I know they probably want it too. If I was in their shoes, I would want to not have to deal with this addiction. I would want control over it. So I think that there's a mindset of I'm doing the right thing by trying to change them and force them to do something different.
Yep. Exactly. That mindset is present. And I think one reason why it's present is because it's modeled quite a bit in the culture, like that parable of the river story that I told, that, and it's like, there is a lot of validity to it. Like if you see a baby floating down the river, of course, like there's no question, like bam, like get into rescue mode.
Totally.
Period.
Yeah.
So, and that's a trauma response. So, trauma is kind of in the field here in families with addiction, and it's not just one person having trauma. When trauma is in the field, there's different roles. that, people go into to try to figure out a strategy
Hmm. Hmm.
to fix it. But
Yeah.
like largely it doesn't work.
So we talked a lot about the theory about kind of why this is happening, what's going on, and some of the challenges that people may be falling into. Some of the families that are not performing effectively in their addiction recovery strategies. So can we dive into more of those strategies that we actually can be taking to be effective with addiction
Yeah.
recovery, both as maybe even a someone who's dealing with addiction as well as the family? Can we go over some of those?
Yeah. Yeah. So one, like in the language that I use the river metaphor quite a bit
Hmm.
as a way for people to start to think about this differently, because the thinking is so ingrained.
Yeah.
And so for me, one of the biggest resources in my life is the river.
Hmm.
So I've taken my boat down the Grand Canyon 5 times,
Yeah.
and so the beginning of the Grand Canyon trip is Lee's Ferry, and what I like to say is no family would show up at Lee's Ferry, the beginning of a 275-mile river trip, with no life jackets or no food.
Mm.
But with addiction in the family, this unpreparedness is the norm.
Yeah.
So I'm really using the river metaphor to help families kind of think about, like, how can we use a linear process like preparing for a river trip
Hmm.
to prepare for actually this family journey with addiction.
Mm.
And so, continuing on that metaphor, I like at Lee's Ferry, you can be down there for a day or something, blowing up your boat, putting all the gear on the shore, organizing it, loading it sequentially, knowing what boat has whatever piece of gear, and putting things in the boat to where, the weight is optimized.
Right.
And so it's like, and then we have a safety talk,
Hmm.
and in that safety talk, it's like there's some specific points that are talked about, like the context,
Hmm.
like if you want to have a safe trip here, like here's some guidelines, some things that not really guidelines, but rules,
Yeah.
and then once people get into the boat, they need to learn some skills. They need to talk to one another. They need to work together as a team and practice. And 179 miles down the river, when you get to Lava Falls, the largest navigable waterway in North America, it's like, hey, we're going to have a lot better chance of getting through there unscathed. And
Mm.
if we flip, we're going to know what to do.
Yeah.
We're going to be with other people, So what I've done is to create a online family community it's not a Facebook group. People can come in, get a username and password, and they can sign up with an alias, so they can actually start getting resources, family specific resources, and communicate with other like-minded people, other people who have addiction in their family. And with each conversation, they can navigate, kind of regulate, like, do they want to use an alias? Do they want to use their own name? Do they want to just type their questions? Do they want to turn on their microphone and talk, or turn on their webcam? So there's a lot of opportunities for families to be self-empowered to regulate, like, their own boundaries
Hmm.
with each with each conversation. So trust building, boundaries, communication skills, and conflict resolution skills, all things that, through the course of having an online community and 2 community chats a week,
Mm.
people are going to start to learn some of that stuff. And so that's just the very beginning
Wow.
for, like, and when people start learning that in the community, like, generally what happens is one family member comes in, they start to engage in some stuff, well, then they can send their username and password to another family member. Say, hey, I saw this video. This just really nailed what happened in our family, when we had dinner together at the last holiday or whatever. So use this username and password, go in there, look at this one particular video, and after you see it, I want to have a conversation with you because it puts a whole different spin on what's happening in our family.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like a beginning potential for, because rarely are like a family of 6, all of them going to come in at the same time,
Right.
unless they've just gone through an intervention together or something like that. If that's the case, that may happen.
Right.
But
right. So in this format, the community especially, you're able to provide resources to them in a structured, consistent, basically all-encompassing way to have those, to give them the information, to shift the context. The community is there to help them shift the context. And it's like, what would you say is different about other online communities or other online resources that might just be available on the internet that people could search for and attempt to implement on their own?
Yeah. Well, there's a ton of stuff about addiction on the internet. There really is. And what makes this different is that this is a place for people to become educated with a lot of different things. It isn't like I'm just pushing one position, because one of the things that happens with addiction is that the family tries to deal with it themselves over and over again, and they get like just about burned out, and the tension and the chaos in the household, till finally they reach out to a treatment center who has interventionists, or they call a specific interventionist or something. And oftentimes those conversations are, well, actually there is like call centers where there could be 30 or 40 people in the call center. And so they're not really helping people to navigate kind of where they're at and what's going to be the best resource or next step for them. It's like, it's like heads for beds kind of thing. The treatment center kind of like, they just want to get people in there, and that's not best practices, obviously. And actually people have died with that. So this is no small deal. I mean, people are dying from this. And an example is just the difference between medical detox and residential detox. And if the client needs medical detox, but what they have is residential detox, and they say, oh yeah, we're going to be fine. And then they send their loved one there and that person dies. And that kind of thing has happened, and I don't want to be like a downer here or anything like that, but every 4 to 8 minutes, someone in the U.S. is, dying of overdose or an alcohol-related cause, and that's a lot of people, and like that's the equivalent of a jet going down every day. And if that was actually happening, it would be a big deal.
Yeah,
and like we couldn't fly or something. Well, like with 911, that kind of thing did happen for a couple days. But with addiction is different. Addiction is seen differently.
Yeah. As far as the difference the difference between medical and residential, what is the difference there? Is there like a heightened level of security or intensity or support? Is residential, are they able to get a hold of the substance more easily, or what's the difference there?
Well, they could hook them up to an IV, like an IV drip or something, which would be more like a medical detox, but they would have doctors there, as opposed to the residential detox. They would just have like the house staff there.
And in that case, if there's like, what is it when when you're detoxing? Like, would there be so much chemicals or things going on in the person's body where their body literally can't hold it? It doesn't have enough, integrity or fortitude to be able to go through that kind of a transition where they would literally die because their body couldn't handle that, or what would be the cause of it to not be the correct solution?
Well, with different chemicals,
Hmm.
alcohol being one,
Hmm.
like if someone gets to a certain standpoint, their detox, they need medical detox to get
Mm.
off of alcohol. And so there's times when it's like someone wants to get off of alcohol, but they can't get into the detox yet.
Hmm.
And it's like they still need to have a little bit of alcohol.
Right.
So they're, because they can literally die,
Wow.
if they try to detox um, without like a complement of, medical interventions.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for answering my question. I was just curious what the difference was. So, really, in this community, it provides support that is more holistically about, hey, we want to get you through this. It's not just about getting you into our services or our program or whatever it might be. It's like, hey, here are the resources. We want to
Right.
support you. There's 2 calls a week, 2 of these community calls that people can get on. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to get the access to the information that they need. And also, I'm sure that it's more intimate than just finding a random link or a site on the web.
Right. Yeah. 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 So the 2 community chats a week, one is Wednesday night, and
Hmm.
I have a topic. I have some stuff that I talk about, and then people can talk about their experience with that topic,
Hmm.
and anybody there's crosstalk,
Yeah.
you know so, and actually people can send a private message to someone who, people can send private messages back and forth,
Right.
and they can say something like, hey, I'm not ready to talk in this community, but what you're talking about is so important to me. Can we talk tomorrow night at 8 o'clock and come into the community? So in the community, there's like 6 chat rooms that people can access.
Hmm.
So it's like, really what I'm trying to do here is to provide a space where people can navigate this themselves and connect with a lot of different people. And yeah, I'm there for 2 community chats a week. And the Friday one is like, I have no format. It's all about their questions, and they can
Hmm.
email me beforehand or just show up, and there can be a discussion. And so I really, like, what I have found is that family members that make decisions when they're in distress and their nervous system is highly activated, they don't have like a majority blood flow to their cortex, so they don't make the best decisions. A lot of
Right.
times they end up resenting the decisions,
Hmm.
and they do it largely because they're in a situation. They may hear something from someone else saying, hey, just sign this check and I'll make that problem go away for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, you'll do what? You'll
Yeah.
make it go away? Like, I'm in.
Yeah.
So families are highly vulnerable, and
Hmm.
I'm really trying to empower them. And yet, the community is a lot about family members being empowered and family members slowly planting seeds with other family members so they too can be empowered, and like just starting to make new decisions, to do like react in a different way, respond as opposed to react,
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
um, it's like, the more change that happens in the context, the better there will be a like movement
Hmm.
towards like what you were were saying when you read my bio before, like creating conditions in the family that are inhospitable to active addiction. That's really possible. That doesn't happen overnight by any means. And it's not just about getting Johnny into treatment and then the problem's gone. You know, Johnny can come back, and if nothing in the family has changed, relapse rates are higher because Johnny can easily slide back into the same role. Right. And if Johnny really wants to practice everything that he's learned while he's been away at treatment or whatever, he'll go into a role that is like a little bit off to the side from the whole family structure, and he'll draw a strong boundary. And the family takes it as really personal, like, oh my God, everything we've done for you, and you're pushing us away. And the reality is that they don't see the structural diagram. They don't see that the family structure is toxic to Johnny. And Johnny needs to do that. And so the family takes it as personal, but the structural piece I keep referring to is impersonal. And that trickles down from generation to generation. And kind of like my story, like I'm a perfect example of that, the trickle down of that structure, and growing up and not knowing anything different and thinking everything is cool. And the reality is, it's like all my relationships are based on this defensive coping kind of thing. And then it's me going in to do my own work, you know, to where I can go from coping to thriving. And I'll bet you know something about that.
I know you do. Becoming our greatest possible self. That's right. That's right,
exactly.
Jack. I love it. I love it, man. And it's like you said, it's being able to identify what is happening, you know, giving people the distinctions, giving people the language, giving people the new perspectives to see things from, so they don't take it personally, so they don't get triggered, so that they can respond rather than react. So I really love that. And if there's any other really powerful distinctions that you feel our audience would benefit from, is there any other that have come up for you along the journey that would really help a family who's dealing with challenges, or really help someone who's dealing with addiction? Like, what distinctions would empower them at this moment, or even you know, the distinctions to want to join the community and be involved in that?
Sure. Well, you know, the distinction piece, what I want to say, and I probably just want to underline or maybe say this a little bit differently.
Sure.
But addiction is not just about one person.
Right.
The more we can kind of like broaden our thinking to understand that addiction is about the context, and actually the culture we live in is in some ways kind of an incubator for addiction to happen. So the choices we make and what we engage in our world, you know, create conditions around us that are either going to, one, make it easier for us to slide into addiction, or, you know, create protective factors. And so what I'm like, the distinction here is families have a lot more control of those protective factors in their family than they do in their culture. So
it's powerful. Very, very powerful. So in terms of the best actions that we could be taking right now for someone who is in a place of addiction, would you say that is to recognize how we can support them more, how we can show up and educate ourselves, right? I think it's the families who are going through this. It starts with education of themselves and shifting their own perspective.
Yeah. So one of the things about, like, I like to think of addiction in the family as an opportunity for everyone's transformation, not just one person.
Yeah.
And so, like, where family members have the most leverage with their loved one, and I want to, like, obvious, like, to me, I think this is obvious. As the addiction progresses, the addiction has more and more pull on that person's brain and less interest in any kind of relationships they had before.
Right.
But where family members really can grow and really can leverage their loved one is to really connect deeply with it, like for family members, to really connect deeply with themselves, get real with themselves, have a heart to heart with themselves like they've never had before about what's important, you know, and then be able to look into their loved one's eyes at the right moment. You know, this isn't any time,
Right.
you know, but finding the right moment and look into their loved one's eyes and really pause and see what's there, you know, and try to connect with what's there and express interest, like what's happening inside there. What is that like for you? You know, to really do their best to connect with them in a deep way, maybe deeper than they ever have before. Like that connection is, if the addiction hasn't gotten too deep, that they're going to remember that. That's going to make an impact. Like saying the same old thing, honey, I love you, I really care about you, or you're really screwing up, you're making bad decisions, or like they've heard that before. Like all the stuff they've heard before isn't really going to be helpful. So how can family members really go deep inside of themselves and connect with something really deep inside of them and then be able to speak from that place?
That takes courage.
This is like no bullshit. Excuse my language, but
it's good.
You're absolutely right, Chris.
Yeah. Wow. So that courage, and I think, you know, we get to this point where it's like, okay, what's it going to be? Am I going to keep doing the same thing over and over again, or am I going to step into my best self, into my courage, because I really care about this person, because I don't want the words to just be words. I want to really dig down deep and pull something out that like is true and is at the soul level going to impact this person, to see how they're showing up, and to give them an opportunity to create an opening of love, of compassion, of grace, but also like the truth, and like, hey, like we must change this. We must do something different, or else it's like game over, you know?
Yeah. It's absolutely true. And it can be game over really easy. And there's a lot of families who have cut off someone just because it's like they've cost them too much as far as like emotional wreckage or financially or, you know, whatever. And they just cut people out of their life. And that cutoff has an impact on the whole family. And it has an impact on like the next generation. And like once that cutoff happens, then we keep it secret. And we're quiet about it. And so, geez, yeah, I forget the question that you asked me.
That was great. Let's like wrap it up with talking about that for the people who feel like it's, you know, they're at their wits' end, and it doesn't even like make sense for them to continue making the attempt. But like you said, that there's an impact to not making the attempt, to giving up. Like, what would you say to those people?
Right. Oh, goodness. Well, so one thing, there is no silver bullet for addiction. I want to say that. And that's one reason why I did this whole community thing, because there is no silver bullet. However, there are some things that people can do. One is they can have an intervention for their loved one. And there's different kinds of intervention, from a surprise to an invitational model. And so there is some interventionists that I know, because I'm a part of this group, the Network of Independent Interventionists. They're independent, meaning they don't take kickbacks from treatment centers. You know, so integrity is really important here. If someone is going to go that route, I would suggest kind of working with someone who's independent. If you can't afford that, then you can call a treatment center that has their own interventionist, and they will come in and do an intervention. And if that person goes into treatment, they'll go into their treatment center. And so that may be a respite, that may be a step. I mean, I was talking with a woman, a book author actually, who wrote the book If You Love Me, A Mother's Journey Through Her Opioid Addiction.
Mm.
And her daughter had been in 40 treatment centers. I mean, 40
Wow.
treatment centers. Do you believe that, Chris? Like that's like 4 and 5. That's not that unusual, but 40?
Wow.
Yeah. So there is no silver bullet. It's really hard for me to say, Chris, here's the answer. Just, like, which is why I'm trying to do this community thing, because people really need to make decisions that they feel good about. When it's their decision, regardless of the outcome, they're going to be empowered to be able to make their next step theirs, as opposed to, it's kind of like, give a man a fish or teach a man to fish. And sometimes, we need to be given a fish. I get it. That's like, I'm not discounting that, but I'm kind of like creating other opportunities.
Yeah. And I hear the breakthrough in what you're sharing for the family in their own personal growth, especially because it's not just, hey, I'm going through the motions to get this person help, so to speak. It's, hey, we're owning that we're a family and we're going to create a solution together. So we get to show up owning this transformation as a family. And one of the next steps to transform the family is to step into the community and really create a new vision, a new possibility, a new future for all of us to get our hope back, to get our inspiration back, to live really great lives.
Right. Exactly. So, what I haven't mentioned is I like the community is a membership level 1, and I do have a 2 and 3. And so families can work together as a family to go through a sequence of facilitated processes for them to help, recognize what all's in the context, reauthor the story of the pathway of addiction is taken through their family, and learn skills to build resilience to deal with the ups and downs, and to create a vision and a plan for the future and how this family wants to be a family together.
Yeah, man. So powerful. Jeff, thank you for sharing about those distinctions. Let's dive into how people can stay connected with you, how they can take the next steps. What do they have to do? What do they get to do to really receive the benefits of this community, of transforming their life and getting the help that they really have been seeking? Yeah.
So my website is www.thefamilyrecoverysolution.com. And on that website, they would learn about the community. They can sign up for the community there. It's like $50 a month for the community. They would pay for 3 months at a time.
Okay.
So for $50 a month, there's like 30 some videos in there, MP3s from a lot of different addiction professionals and people who have a recovery journey story to tell. There's a bunch of PDFs and family-specific articles, and these community chats and chatting with one another, and there's a thing on my website that says, make an appointment. And so someone can make an appointment and chat with me for a little bit. And so, and the other thing is that, people who want one-on-one conversation can sign up for individual coaching for their particular situation. And I'm going to still encourage the community piece too. I mean, that would come with the individual coaching.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Awesome. It sounds like some really great options that people have. Really, if they want the community, they can really dive into that and start getting access to that for super, super low barrier to entry, like less than, $50 a month, like $50. That's nothing. It's the cost of a pair of shoes or something like that. And I really, really acknowledge you for putting that information available for that low of a cost, low of a price. And then to work with you one-on-one would absolutely be, tremendous help for people as well, because they get that customized solution for them, and you can hear the blind spots, the places where they're stopped, the places where they might not be having the empowering context to be able to get through the most effectively, or to really have hope. So I really see the benefit of both of those, and wherever people are at, definitely take that next step with Jeff, because he is a powerhouse, and he's absolutely empowering everyone around him to step into their greatest possible health and greatest possible family connection. I really hear how important family is to you, and I think that that's different from other therapists. I hear the difference is, for you, it's about the family context. It's about the transformation of the family and how they see themselves, not just, hey, let's fix a problem, let's put a Band-Aid over it, let's get to the root and uproot it. No, it's like, hey, let's have a transformation, let's have a whole new life at the end of this, so much more equipped and prepared to handle whatever comes our way. So I really acknowledge you for creating this, Jeff. It's beautiful, man.
Thank you. And Chris, I really appreciate the invite to be on your show, and the power of ask. And navigating to be your best self. It's like, how congruent am I with that? Like, woohoo!
Yeah. And with how much of an epidemic addiction is, man. Like, I'm so grateful that we were able to have this conversation, because whether people realize it or recognize it or consciously are aware of it or not, on our journey to being our greatest possible self, there's going to be addictions. There's going to be things, whether it's drugs and alcohol, whether it's eating, whether it's, having certain thought patterns about ourselves. I really see that this applies in a lot of different ways. So I'm so happy we were able to have you on, man.
Yeah.
Awesome. So
people
are definitely going to stay connected with you. They go to thefamilyrecoverysolution.com or facebook.com/TFRSOLUTION. TFR Solution. Facebook.com/TFR Solution. And they can stay connected with you there. And Jeff, thanks so much for coming on. You're an amazing human being, and I'm grateful to be on the journey and keep supporting you and getting the message out and making a bigger impact, man. Thanks for coming on.
Chris, thank you so much.
Awesome. We'll see you soon, okay?
Okay.
All right. Take care.